So thank you for inviting me to speak today. I've actually lived in Surrey my whole life, so it's really exciting to hear about all the work everybody's doing for nature recovery here in Surrey. Before I start, I just wanted to briefly mention this new E3 Sharing Space for Nature initiative that's just started at my university. It's an £8.3 million grant from the government to do a lot of work on spatial planning, nature recovery networks here across the southeast, and also in East Kent where the campus is. And I've recently started an internship on this project as well, where I'm working with the Rebuilding Nature Alliance, which are a new group, and they're looking to do some mapping and strategic planning for a strategic nature network across the whole country, and looking to find the most investable places for nature across the country. So, yeah, if you want to chat to me about that afterwards, I just thought I'd mention it because it's relevant to a lot of the conversations we're having today. But yeah, today I'm going to be talking about a piece of research that I've been sort of developing over the past few months about how we can develop a spatial plan for re-establishing natural processes across southeast England. So as I'm sure a lot of you know, our ecosystems are pretty knackered in England. They're very degraded. They're not really governed by natural processes at all. But it's really, really important that we try and re-establish these natural processes and functioning ecosystems, particularly in the case of climate change, where they're going to be under a lot more pressures and stochastic disturbances. And when you restore a functioning ecosystem, you not only get uplift in biodiversity, but you tend to get a lot of other benefits for wider society, like increased carbon storage in the ecosystem. You might get flood mitigation, cleaner water. And restoring natural processes is potentially more of a cost-effective approach to nature recovery. If you restore the ecosystem, the idea is that it kind of, if you restore the natural processes, it kind of takes care of itself, whereas if we manage an ecosystem for a specific habitat or species, we have to continually manage it, and it's normally more expensive. But yeah, so it's really important that we develop these spatial plans and we start thinking about re-establishing natural processes, because from my knowledge, a lot of the spatial planning in nature recovery doesn't take into account that much how we can re-establish natural processes. So I think this piece of work might be really useful. And the approach that I'm going to be using to do this is the systematic conservation planning approach. So it's kind of like the gold standard for spatial planning, for biodiversity inclusive spatial planning. And it's a well-established framework that's used all over the world. And what's really good about it is it integrates social and economic data alongside the ecological data, so you're continually getting stakeholder feedback to refine your outputs. It was primarily developed for protected area networks, but it's more and more being used now for spatially targeting management actions, agri-environment schemes. And it's got proven success in England as well, so some of the wildlife trusts have been using it to develop their nature recovery networks. Some of the districts in England are using it to develop their LNRSs. I think Oxfordshire and I think Cornwall are as well. So this is the kind of framework that I'm going to be using to develop this spatial plan. And very broadly, it can be split into these three steps. So you define your objectives and the context for the planning region. So in my case, I've got this overarching goal of trying to understand how we can restore natural processes in southeast England, which is some of the highest biodiversity levels, some of our best agricultural land, and is under a lot of development pressure as well, as we heard earlier. And then, so the next step is setting your targets for biodiversity. So you get all your spatial data, and you set targets so that the model can meet those targets based on like the minimum cost that you put into the model. The final stage, the prioritization, where you plug it all into this model, and it spits out the outputs that meet your biodiversity or nature recovery targets at the minimum cost in the planning region. So this is very broadly the areas that I'm going to be looking at where we can re-establish natural processes, and I'm building on a piece of work that a PhD student in the same research group as me has done for Kent Wildlife Trust. So Kent Wildlife Trust wanted a spatial plan where they, as part of their spatial plan, they wanted to understand where would be most suitable to restore nature in more of a passive, hands-off way. So he developed this passive management layer, and I've mapped it across England, or southeast England, sorry. And then what I want to do is build on that and say, within these very broad areas that might be suitable for this more passive form of nature recovery, what are the actual natural processes that we want to re-establish, more spatial targeting of the ecosystems that we want to restore and how we want to restore them in this hands-off sort of natural processes way. And I know probably a lot of you are thinking, thank you, the last thing we need is another opportunity map. But I just wanted to show how I think this work will actually align and complement quite well with the LNRSs that are going on at the moment. So firstly, I think the big thing is that I'm taking a regional approach to this. So I'm zooming out from the LNRS districts. And I think that will be really important when we start thinking more strategically about joining up these patches of areas of particular importance for biodiversity, and how we can make them more resilient and connected across the wider landscape by re-establishing natural processes and functioning ecosystems. The other thing is, from my understanding of the LNRSs, within a patch of land, you might have multiple management actions or suggestions, and I think, again, using this piece of work I'm doing alongside the LNRSs might help clarify which of those potential measures for nature recovery we can take place, we should be doing in that specific location. And also, again, I think through the LNRSs we'll have more of an understanding of willing landowners. And by the time I start producing the outputs, hopefully the LNRSs will have been published by then, so I can just put that straight into the model, and it will be more spatial targeting for what natural processes we want to restore. And finally, I just wanted to touch on how I think restoring natural processes and functioning ecosystems is actually a really good opportunity if we start thinking about nature investment in the future. So as I was mentioning earlier, when you restore an ecosystem to its full functioning state, you not only get gains in biodiversity, but you also get a lot of other benefits as well, such as carbon and nutrient storage and things like that. So I think if we start taking this more landscape scale, whole ecosystem restoration approach, I think there's a lot of opportunities as the frameworks get more developed where we can stack some of these environmental payments, and it will give landowners much more assurance if they can get revenue from not just one revenue stream, but multiple others. And I think one of the first steps to thinking this way is having a spatial plan where we should prioritise re-establishing these functioning ecosystems in the best places for nature, but also minimising the trade-offs and costs with these other sectors as well. So thank you for listening.